guys, this is the Octopus Hermit, emerging from my solitude to talk about the things I viewed. This is my review of One Piece Chapter 782. Now this chapter had some pretty interesting stuff, so let's dive right into it. We start with Luffy and Doflamingo just clashing with each other, and they're using Color of Conqueror Haki. Treble is watching them, and this causes him to have a flashback of when he first saw Doflamingo use the Color of Conqueror Haki back when Doflamingo was a little kid. And through this flashback, we find out how the Doflamingo family started. And we see through this flashback that Treble provided Doflamingo not only with a gun, but with the Ito Ito no Mi. Now, one of the interesting things about this flashback was that it showed that Doflamingo wasn't only evil by nature, but he's evil by nurture as well. From a young age, Doflamingo's psychopathic tendencies were enabled by his 4 executives. This flashback also serves to show a bit of juxtaposition between Doflamingo and his family, and Luffy and his Nakama. Doflamingo's family consists of underlings, while Luffy's crew is consisted of comrades. The goals of the members of Doflamingo's family are simply to serve Doflamingo, but Luffy's Nakama each have their own individual goals and dreams. This is one of the reasons that I'm not sure if Bartolomeo will be joining the Straw Hats, because he doesn't actually have any dreams of his own, that we know of, at least. We just know that he's a fan of Luffy. Now, I could see him joining the crew, and then we find out later what his goals are, any dreams that he has, but at this point, I don't see it. I want him to join the crew. I think he would be similar to how Gokudera from Hitman Reborn was. He would be giving constant support not only to Luffy, but to all the other Straw Hats as well. We see that Doflamingo's group, usually when they fight as a group. They all fight together. Luffy and his Nakama, on the other hand, they tend to split up during arcs, and they have one-on-one battles constantly. Part of the weakness of Doflamingo's crew was that they split up and they were doing one-on-one fights, instead of just staying together and fighting as a group. And we see that they got taken down with very little effort, mainly because their opponents had more power than they did. Pika and Diamante are pretty strong, but they aren't on the same level as Zoro and Kuros by a long shot. And one of the most important differences between Doflamingo and his family and Luffy and his Nakama is the issue of trust. Treble was talking to Law in this chapter, and he was saying that Doflamingo and his executives were the real family in his family, and everybody else is just an underling that Doflamingo rules with fear. But judging from Doflamingo's actions, it doesn't seem like the executives are even considered as family, because in the flashback we see that he straight up lies to their faces. Doflamingo tells his executives that he was attacked in Marijoa and his father was killed there. But we know that Doflamingo's father was really shot in the back of the head by Doflamingo. So we see that after Doflamingo's 4 executives pledged their loyalty to him, he still lied right to their faces. In this chapter, we also get a pretty entertaining slugfest between Doflamingo and Luffy. We know that Doflamingo and Luffy are both pretty injured at this point. Luffy's been fighting since the Colosseum, and Doflamingo got a pretty bad injury from Law in the last chapter. Doflamingo managed to block a few of Luffy's hits, but then Luffy managed to get some in before being knocked backwards by Doflamingo's attack. And so when Doflamingo knocked Luffy backwards, Luffy got stuck in Treble's mucus. And this chapter raised some questions about Treble's abilities. We see that Luffy tries to punch Treble with armament haki, but the punches just go right through. And Luffy says, "Why are my punches going through? I should be able to hit a Logia if I'm using armament haki." And Treble says, "Who said I was a Logia user?" Now, if Treble's fruit, the Beta Beta no Mi, isn't a Logia type, and it's not named after an animal, so it wouldn't be a Zoan type, that would mean that it's a Paramecia type. And we see later on in the chapter that Law manages to get an attack in on Treble, and we see that his body is actually really skinny underneath all his clothes and everything. And Luffy's reaction to seeing Treble's skinny body implies that Treble just shifts his body out of the way whenever he's attacked. And it seems like he's a Logia that way. But when Usopp was fighting Treble, Treble got hit with an attack that sliced him up. So there's still a bit we don't quite know about Treble. So once Law gets a good hit on Treble and slices him up pretty badly, Treble lights up his staff and he blows himself up. And that's where the chapter ends. Now this is a pretty reckless move on Treble's part since Doflamingo is injured and he's right up there with Treble. If Doflamingo's not careful, he could get hurt in the explosion. He could probably make a string shield, or he could maybe go full body armament haki. Now if Law and Luffy are going to escape the explosion, Law opening up his room and using shambles to take him and Luffy out of there would be the most obvious means of escape. There's also the possibility that Sabo showed up, and he's there either controlling or absorbing the flames, so that Law and Luffy don't get hurt. And another interesting detail is that near the end of the chapter, before the explosion happened, we see the Tontato looking towards the castle, and they have uneasy feelings. Now it's not entirely clear on what the Tontato were feeling uneasy about. We don't know if it was related to the explosion, if it's related to Doflamingo, if maybe he's gonna go into a rage, or if it's something even more sinister. So that's all for this week's chapter. This was a pretty interesting chapter. We found out how the family started. We saw some one-on-one fighting with Doflamingo and Luffy. It seems like Treble's finally out of the way, and things just keep getting closer and closer towards the climax. So that's all for my review. Feel free to like my video, subscribe to my channel, leave a comment, whatever floats your boat. Thanks for watching, and I'll see ya.